Hello, YouTube. All right, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Noise RV Adventures. Okay, I don't know if you can see here under the hood, we've got like kind of a wiring nightmare down here underneath the hood because I have I basically jumpered the vehicle starting battery to the vehicle leisure or house battery. That was done so that when the system was plugged into the 120 volt power at the RV park, apparently when you plug into 120 volt power, it has the ability to charge the 12 volt battery. It converts 120 volts to 12 volts and runs it through the system and charges the battery. But the problem is, even when I had the switch to connect the two batteries here switched on, this little manual switch, I don't know if you can see that red switch, somehow it wasn't connected or it wasn't charging like the vehicle battery. It was only whoa. It was only charging the house battery and not the vehicle battery, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So as a temporary fix, I took a jumper and just ran to connect the two batteries. So that's already a mess. Then we got all these old wires that are all messed up. I don't even know what goes where. And it looks like this may be a battery isolator. I'm not 100% sure, but you can see it's all rusty. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it is fairly rusty. So I don't know how well things are working. This RV is a 1995, I think. A 95 or 96 four winds. I think it's a 95 four winds. Maybe a 96. But long story short, I'm trying to get 120 volt power in the RV and debating, whether I want to get a whole new bank of leisure battery, which could get kind of expensive, or just keep it simple and use the existing one battery, which is what it's looking like I may do for now, just to keep costs low. Now, what I have done, since you saw it last time, if you see this little wire right here with the yellow tip, my finger's pointing right there, that is a wire that I pulled, which I'm getting ready to move, actually. It's a 10 gauge wire that I pulled through the vehicle cab underneath the console there. I don't know if you can see the wire running there. See that little black wire? That's what I pulled, and I brought it all the way up here to the inverter. Right now it's hooked up to the positive, the red one, even though it's a black cable, which should be negative. But anyhow, I had that pulled, and then black was not connected, which is the ground or the negative. So what I did was I took a jumper cable and I just connected that to ground it on the vehicle body to see if I could turn on the inverter, and I did, and it worked. So I'm able to get 120 volts up to 2,000 watts off this inverter, as long as my battery will support it. Now the problem is trying to run appliances. With up to 2,000 watts, I can actually potentially run the toaster oven, not all at the same time, mind you, but if I balance load and make sure I'm under 2,000 watts, I can run the toaster oven. I can also run the microwave. I could potentially run the refrigerator. I can run the TVs. I can run my computer. I can run all the stuff that requires 120 volts. The issue, though, is going to be battery life. If I have the vehicle running, it'll charge, so I can run those things when it's charged. But trying to figure out how much battery life is left is the concern. So I'm looking into getting a meter, a 12 volt meter, which I think I'm going to install up here somewhere so I can have a readout of what the vehicle battery is. And then, the vehicle and the house battery, because they're tied together. But the other thing I need to do is separate those two, because I don't think the isolator is working, or the charging system. I don't know. I don't know how they wired it initially. So I may end up wiring everything myself. But for today, I just want to get a system working without me having to hook up jumper cables and do some weird stuff that I did to get it working today, just to test it out. So I went ahead and I went to Home Depot and then later Walmart to buy some more 10 AWG wire. And also this time I got a wire stripper and crimper to try to make sure everything is a good connection. Now, some of you might wonder why I went with 10 AWG instead of something, a smaller number, which would be a larger, thicker wire, like a 6 gauge, an 8 gauge, a 4 gauge, 2 gauge, or 1 gauge, or a 0 gauge. The reason is expense. It's more expensive to get the bigger wire. The second problem that I could have is trying to plug everything into the connections. They're kind of small. The third thing has to do with just looking at how powerful the system is. And the limiting factor in all this that I'm looking at right now is actually my inverter. Right here, my Jupiter inverter, which is a 2,000 watt inverter. See, it even says so on the box, 2,000 watts. Well, with 2,000 watts of potential output, that means that's how much power it would draw maximum. Well, maximum it would draw is more than 2,000. I think it can surge up a little bit, but pretty much it runs at 2,000. Okay, 2,000 watts. So looking at that, I was using that as a basis for the wire gauge as to what I needed as a minimum. And it turns out that the minimum I need really is 12 gauge, which is actually even smaller wire than this. But 10 gauge will handle about 2,400 watts, 2,400 watts, which is more than what my inverter is going to output. So 10 gauge should be more than adequate to run the power through for the 2,000 watt inverter. That's my theory. If you guys are into electronics and actually understand this more, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I suspect that running 10 gauge wire is going to be more than adequate. I could get a thicker wire, but it costs more. And I didn't, I wanted to kind of watch my expenditures. They have like larger wiring, but you have to cut it yourself. You have to run it through the cutter, and cut it, and they sell it by the foot. So like the next gauge I saw that looked like it might have been a possibility was like 6 gauge wire, which would have been better. But I could end up spending like $60 to $100 just on wiring, and I didn't want to do that. Especially since it may be overkill for what I'm pulling, which is, I think at the most that I'm going to pull is for my toaster oven if I decide to bake something. And I think that's 1,800 watts. And I don't think it's more than 1,800. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's 1,800 watts or less. And the microwave is like about 800 or 900 watts. So as long as I don't run everything at the same time, I should be okay. Running the air conditioning, I've kind of put that on the back burner for now, because of the issue of how much power output I would need, but also battery issue, storage, for how much energy you'd use up and how fast it would drain. So for now, for today, what I plan on doing is rewiring. Well, not rewiring, but I'm going to pull another wire. Right now the black is positive, so I'm going to switch that black. I'm just going to screw it here to the negative here, and then negative on the other end on the battery terminal. And I'm basically pulling 2 wires. Instead of grounding it to the chassis, I'm pulling 2 separate wires. That way we know exactly what's going on. When I tested it, I grounded it with a jumper from the negative to the chassis, and it worked. But I think instead of drilling more holes and doing all that stuff, because I had a loose connection with Little Blue due to the screw coming loose, and since I have bought another 10 AWG wire that's red, and I picked red on purpose, I'm going to go ahead and wire this one, the red one, as positive and the black one as negative. So we're just going to move that cable from the top one, the red, to the black. And we're also going to disconnect. The first thing I'm going to do is disconnect it off the battery so I don't connect positive to negative. So we're going to have 2 wires. And that will allow me to basically turn on the inverter, and it'll pull power from the vehicle leisure battery, which right now is tied into the starter battery. So I may need to make another switch. Not need to, may need, but I will do it. I'm going to put another manual switch so I can connect and disconnect those 2 batteries at will. Because what I don't want to do is run the inverter and use up all the power from both batteries. So the idea is to run the inverter off the leisure battery and maybe even the leisure battery and the house battery if I need 2 batteries. I may install another bank later, even though you're supposed to do it all at once, but it has to do with cost issues. So, I'm debating. It'll be an issue of me buying all batteries at the same time, all new batteries, which can be very expensive. But for now, we're just going to run it off one leisure battery, the one that's currently under the hood, which doesn't cost me any additional money since I already have that battery. All we're doing is just hooking up wires. So stay tuned for part 2, which will show you the finished product. I'm not going to bother showing you what I'm doing because all I'm doing is really just, I'm going to move that wire. I'm going to pull another wire underneath the console and then, hook it up to the battery terminal. I'll be using the crimper and some eyelets, the attachment things to basically attach like that right there, that little yellow attachment thingy right there. But basically, I'll make little connectors. And oh yeah, the reason I'm going with 10 AWG is because when I looked at its chart, it said 10 AWG will handle, I think, up to 2400 watts or 30 amps. And really, I'm not really going to go through more than I think for what I'm doing here in the RV. I don't think I'm going to go through more than, mostly 15 amps. I think most house circuits are like 15 amps. Even my adapter, remember the cable that we're going to be running for hooking up the stuff from the inverter when we take the 120 volt output and hook it up, through the back, which I'll figure out some better wiring, some way of doing it that's not so ugly. But basically, even that is only 15 amps. So getting larger wire would be better, but it's just more expensive and it's like overkill. So I'm just going with, what I think I need as a minimum. And if I need to go higher, like in the event I want to run air conditioning or something, it'll be a direct connection. I'll have to figure something else out. I don't think I'm going to be running AC off this. I might try it maybe one day, but I think I'll end up blowing circuits. I do want to put in an inline fuse at the battery connection. I don't have a fuse available right now, and I did look at Walmart and Home Depot, and I couldn't find a 12 volt fuse, the large one that has at least a 10 gauge wire. I saw Walmart had a little one in the automotive section that had a 12 gauge wire, but I didn't want to downgrade the connection because that 12 gauge wire and that fuse that was in the automotive section at Walmart, I had installed in Little Blue, and it melted when I was cooking using the rice cooker. And that's only 300 watts. I don't know how many amps that is. So I'm going to try to go back to the flea market, and hopefully I can find the big one again. Like the one I currently have in Little Blue. It's lasted all this time. I'm going to get that. I'm going to try to install either 20 or 25 amps. That's what I need to do. I don't really want to go higher than 25 amps because then the fusible link doesn't really work because the wire could end up melting before the fuse does. So basically, I think I have like a 40 amp circuit fuse in there, which is useless right now. I don't know if this is making any sense to you. It may make more sense once I get the whole system together and actually walk, viewers through what's going on, how things work, and what's supposed to blow and when. It's just for safety. Right now, I'm going to be hooking things up without safety. And the reason is I just want to get it working. We'll add the safety later because I got to go by flea market or order it online, but online could take a while. So I'm just going to go to the flea market and try to pick it up this weekend if I get a chance. So stay tuned. Look for part 2 of this video here as I cut everything and prepare it and hook it all up.